Oh, I think they can see they can see us now. Good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Good morning. Welcome to another edition of the Literary Hour. My name is Jackie Sayegh, and my co-host is Dr. K. Moses Nagbe. Hi, Prof. Prof is having some problems with his computer, so we can wait a little while for him. Sorry, Prof. We'll wait. We'll wait. We want to hear you, so we'll wait. Oh, we should. I should go ahead. Okay. Okay. I should go there. I can't understand what Prof is saying. We can't hear you, Prof. Can anybody hear him? Come on, guys. Type yes, no. Prof, can you type in a chat, in a private chat, and then we can see? Okay, while we're doing that, please share the show and call your friends, because today we're going to be talking about rankings and criteria in judging literary work and art. So we'll wait for Prof. Yeah, Samson said he's not hearing Prof. You got 1900 computer. Prof, I'm sorry. Yeah, Prof. Nobody, they can't hear you, but we'll wait for you, and I'll just kind of introduce the topic. So, for those of us who were at the University of Liberia when Prof. Nagbe was there, there was a freshman English article that we all read called "How Do You Know It Is Good?" And when Prof comes on, I'm going to tell him a secret about that article. Prof, please hold on a second. Prof, can you hear us? William said that you should exit and come back in. So unmute, Prof, exit StreamYard and come back into StreamYard. Just just leave and come back in, yeah. Okay. So we'll wait for you, Prof. I will move you, and then you can come back in. Is that okay? exit and come back. So we're not gonna see you. I'm gonna move you, Prof, and then I'll wait for you to come back in. Prof William wants you to call him. His number is on the chat. Okay, so while we're waiting for Prof, and Prof is going to call William, and then William is going to help him. Today we're going to talk about standards, and we're going to talk about criteria. So when Prof and I were speaking last week, I said that Dr. Mary Antoinette Brown Sherman was the best president. Something's wrong with my computer also. Was the best president ever at the University of Liberia, and Prof disagreed. And Prof asked me, he said, what do you mean by best? How do you rate best? And I tried to explain to him the criteria I use for for Dr. Mary Antoinette Brown Sherman. So Prof and I had a conversation after, and the conversation continued throughout the week to say, how do we judge something that's good, someone who is good? And I kept saying, well, and I gave him my criteria. So Prof mentioned this article, and I remember this article. And those of you who are here, I'm sure some of you remember this article. We had it, Prof, we're still waiting. I see you. We're still waiting for you. So I remember this article. Prof and I discussed this article. Those of you who went to the University of Liberia when Prof was a professor, you know the article, How Do You Know It Is Good? And we used to have fun with this article because it was, how do you know it's good? And the answer is by having these set criteria, by being with the good, you become good. So we always used to joke, it's like if you're eating rice, people will say, well, how do you know it's good? If somebody is dating somebody, we will say, well, how do you know that person is good? So it became a running joke. But the article is a very good article. So it's by Maya Maines. I look her up. She passed away at the age of 85. She was a social critic, a writer, and she died, I think, 1990. And I think she would be amused at how we in Liberia use her article. But we had fun with the article. So I'm going to read a little bit of it. I think it's allowed because we're not reading the entire article. And this will set the stage. So when Prof comes back, we're able to discuss how we know it is good. What are the criteria that we use when we're judging a piece of literature? And then we're going to look at specific literature, especially African literature. So if I can bring it up, it's by Maya Maines, and it's called How Do You Know It Is Good? And I will read just a little bit, and please just follow while we wait. And she says, and I quote, suppose there were no critics to tell us how to react to a picture, a play, or a new composition of music. Suppose we wandered innocent as the dawn into an art exhibit of unsigned paintings. By what standards, by what values would we decide whether they were good or bad, talented or untalented, successes or failures? How can we ever know that what we think is right? So she said, for the last 15, 20 years, the fashion in criticism or appreciation of the arts has been to deny the existence of any valid criteria and to make the word good and bad irrelevant, immaterial, and inapplicable. There is no such thing, we are told, as a set of standards. So she says the word new in our country especially has magical connotations. What is new must be good, and what is old is probably bad. But all these, I maintain, are forms of abdication from the responsibility of judgment. In creating, the artist commits himself. In appreciating, you have a commitment of your own. For after all, it is the audience which makes the art. But what are these standards? How do you get them? How do you know they are the right ones? How can you make a clear pattern out of so many intangibles? Well, for one thing, it is fairly obvious that the more you read and see and hear, the more equipped you'll be to practice the art of association, which is the basis of all understanding. The more you live and the more you look, the more aware you are of a consistent pattern, as universal as the stars, as breathing, as night and day underlying everything. I will call this pattern and this rhythm and order, not order, and order. Within it exists diversity of form. Without it, there is chaos. Purpose and craftsmanship, ends and means. Standards are as timeless as the universe itself. And when you have committed yourself to them, you have acquired a passport to that elusive but immutable realm of truth. Keep it with you in the forest of bewilderment and never be afraid to speak up. So that's what we come to. How do you know it is good? And Maya means is saying that you know it is good because you have these criteria built over time that you can use and say, oh, okay, I know it is good because I can associate these things with a pattern. It is timeless. It appeals to me because it is timeless. It is classic. So Prof and I, we decided that we're going to look at pieces of literature and see what makes good literature. What is it when you read, it's just a good book, but then when you read others, they are classic. Why? What's the difference between just reading a good book, being amused, and being a classic? Why is it that we say War and Peace is a classic, right? But maybe, just maybe, and I'm sorry for those of you who think it's a classic, but just maybe, Half of the Yellow Sun. It's just a good read. So what distinguishes one book from the other? And that's what Prof and I are here to discuss. Good literature makes you think, right? You're reading a book, you're reading a tabloid trash. It's just there to amuse you. But when you're reading a book, it has a universal theme. It may be love, it may be loss, it may be displacement, it may be exile, it may be dispossession, but it appeals to the human condition, right? So we see a book like To Kill a Mockingbird, right? And we say, but why is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, why is it a classic? Well, in the 1960s, there were not a lot of books that dealt with racism, segregation, and justice, right? So and then to use the stylistic element of seeing the characters through the eyes of a young person. That's a stylistic method. So they say, okay, maybe this hasn't been ever done before. This is a classic, right? Okay, so Prof is coming on soon. Or we say a book like Prof is here. So hi, Prof. Can you hear us? Prof, can you hear us? And then we're saying that okay, and then one criteria is also that it pushes the boundary, right? Like we say about To Kill a Mockingbird, it pushes the boundary, so it creates something new. Maybe books were not dealing with racism or social justice or equity at the time, but in the 1960s we see To Kill a Mockingbird. We see the stylistic method of writing this book at the point of view of a child. So all of these things makes it a classic. It pushes the envelope. It introduces something that probably was a taboo at the time, right? So it becomes a classic. Prof, are you still with us? Your main computer microphone is on mute, so you have to move it from mute. Okay, and a book like Gone with the Wind, right? I wouldn't say, I mean, and you can differ with me. Those of you who read Gone with the Wind, I say it's a good book, but I don't see it as a classic. It's a book with a setting in the Civil War in the United States, but I don't see it as a classic, right? Now we come to a book like Pride and Prejudice, a universal theme, right? Love, unrequited love, status in society, and that book is a classic. So when we're discussing classics, we're thinking like, okay, now she says, how do you know it is good? And we are saying that we're not going to use it whether it's good or bad. We're going to use a set of criteria. And what is the criteria that we're going to use to judge a piece of literature? Well, the first one, that the theme must be universal. It must be love, it must be hate, it must be social class. Okay, so Prof is on the phone. Okay, he will join us soon. It must be social class. It must be something that appeals to the average reader. So if you say a book like, which I like, Frankenstein. So Frankenstein actually is very interesting, right? Because people say, oh, Frankenstein is a monster. No, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley is about nurture and nature. So she's basically asking this question: what makes the person? Is it the way they are brought up, or is this how they are? So when they're born, does nature play a role and say, okay, you're just going to be bad? I know back home we say, oh, this person is just bad, but in that Frankenstein book, the question that's been asked, the universal question is, what makes a person good or bad? Is it the environment that makes the person good or bad, or is the person just born bad? So that universal theme or that universal question and the way it's presented, in the form of a monster, as people say, becomes, right, a classic. So as we say, it's the universal theme of love, loss, hate, nurture, or nature. All of those things, would make it a classic. Now, Prof said to me, why do you think Mary Antoinette Brown Sherman is the best president? And for me, I see it as the standards that she set were standards that I believe other presidents at the University of Liberia did not set. So I say, I think she's the best, and Prof disagrees. So when he comes, we will continue that conversation. Okay, what makes a literature a good piece of literature, right? And we have said the theme, but also stylistically, right? The way the person writes. So a book like uh, a book like a book like 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, right? He uses social realism to chart the course of time. And I believe it's a classic because we all think about time marching on. So if time is marching on, that's a universal theme. So he uses magical realism, and they say, oh, this is a good book. It's like a classic of Spanish literature, right? Oh, sorry, it's Prof. Prof, are you on? Okay, another book we say, and please, you guys, feel free to type your the books that you consider classic, and then we will kind of like go back and forth discussing as to why they are classics. Another book that I think is overlooked, but I think that it's one of the very first francophone. Oh, okay. So they say I should let Prof in, and Prof is here. Okay. Another book is War and Peace. War and Peace is a huge book, but the setting, right? The setting and the way it is, the story is woven in. Anna Karenina is another one. Another book I know that you all know, but I think it is a classic, right? Is Things Fall Apart. It may be one of the most enduring classics of Africa, but it is a classic, right? The simplicity of his style of writing, but yet the way he weaves proverbs, sayings, cultural rituals, rites into his book. the universal theme of displacement, right? Christianity versus traditional religion. What happens when your child goes against you, as Okongo's child did? All of these things are woven into Things Fall Apart. That is a classic, right? So I would say also Usman Sembène's God's Bits of Wood is a classic, because in that book, if you've read it, it doesn't have a hero, right? The protagonist is not there. It is the people, the community that they are fighting for equal pay to the white man. That's a classic book, and I think it was the first francophone, no, the African Child, Camera Live book that we all read, was the first classic francophone literary work. They say like it was one of the best francophone literary work. I don't think so, but I think his book, The Radiance of the King, was much better than The African Child. Okay, so Prof is still on the phone, but I encourage you to list your books, and then we can talk about your books while we wait for Prof. So we have a criteria now, right? We have that the style has to be innovative, something that we haven't seen before. It must introduce themes that appeal to us, universal themes. So we have that. So okay, I think my computer is about to. Okay, so everybody's is like that now. Okay, so now the next one. Why do we say that this is a classic? Because it has endured, right? A book that is written 10 years ago, we don't consider it a classic. It's a book. It may become a classic, but a classic, when we say, oh, this person is a classic, it means that they're old, right? It's old. So it must endure over time. It must give rise to other books. So a book like Herman Melville, Moby Dick, right? Even though it's about a whale, we say that the theme in this book is about universal longing. It's about achievement. It's about wanting something, I guess, that you cannot have, right? So because of that, we say Moby Dick is a classic. It was written, I think, in the 1800s, right? But it's a classic. Jean R. by Charlotte Bronte. Oh, was written 1847 when Liberia became independent, right? That's a classic. Other books, I would not say, well, Weep Not Child is a classic because it talks about the Malmo uprising. So that was a specific event. I think that it was one of the few books where Ngugi wa Thiong'o wrote under his Christian name, James Ngugi. As we all know, he's very pro Kikuyu. So he wrote that. It's also one of the books that brings to mind the mass displacement of the Kikuyu people, right? So the displacement, the colonization, the fight for survival, fight for land. It may not be a universal theme, but it does appeal to a vast majority of people. So I would say that is a classic. So do you guys have classics that you want us to discuss before we continue and we wait for Prof? If so, please put it. And then I would say Murder in the Kisawa Patch, if we're coming to whom. Is it a classic? Why is it a classic? Why do you think? How do you know it is good? What criteria are you using? And so is Murder in the Kisawa Patch a classic, a West African classic or a Liberian classic? And why? That's one of the questions that now I will pose to you. So we can have a discussion while we wait for Prof. Another book is we know that we say William Shakespeare. Almost everything he wrote is a classic because it deals with universal themes. We know that, but again, like I say, list the ones that you think have enduring meaning for you, and then we can discuss it. Another book. My favorite book, right? The book that I love is The Eyes Were Watching God, right? But it's not, I don't think it's a classic. I think that the themes in the book, love, lost, belonging, displacement, right? Um, community, love of self, finding self, all of those are universal themes. But I do not believe that the book is a classic. Maybe over time it will be, but I do not think that it has reached where it's supposed to reach when we say this book is a classic. It's like when I'm looking at art, and my daughter, who's an artist, she says to me, "Oh, this is art." And I say, no, when I see art, I want to be able to say, oh, this is a table, this is a chair. That's what I want to do. And she said, no, mommy, it has to speak to you. So abstract art is not my thing. And I try very hard. But how do you know it is good? Again, there's these eminent persons who have said that, oh, no, 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 no. These are the criteria that we use. Remember what Maya means? It must have purpose, right? It must have unity of form. It must have coherence. So when you're judging your work of art, whether it's literary, whether it's a painting, you're asking yourself, why did the artist draw this? What is he trying to say? And then you say, oh, what he's trying to say is this. I know what he's trying to say, so it appeals to you. So that's how you're going to be able to interpret the art, as Maya may say. Another book I think is Ayekwe Ama's book, because in Ayekwe Ama's book, The Beautiful Ones Are Not Yet Born, the protagonist does not have a name, right? He's called the man. But Ayekwe Ama's book is an African classic. It deals with corruption, which is like a universal theme, not only in Africa, around the world, as we've seen with the Pandora Papers, but he shows that the man is able to withstand corruption. The man is able to say, I'm not going to steal, right? And of course, his wife, Oyo, is angry with him because why didn't he take the money? But in that book, he's making the character nameless, because the character can be anybody, right? It could be you, it could be me, it could be your brother, so the man is able to withstand corruption. And people say this is an African classic, along with Things Fall Apart, along with Weep Not Child, along with, they say, Camera Live, The African Child, Usman Semben, God's Bits of Wood. I would say that Ilichi Amadi's The Concubine, I think is a classic. I think, Hamilton Zilli says that Pilgrims Progress, yes, Pilgrims Progress is a classic. Mombedo says Pilgrims Progress, yeah, Gulliver Travels, yeah, those are the early books that have stood the test of time, right? Books like, I don't know, The Canterbury Tales, yeah, The Canterbury Tales. That's a good book, that shows that tells it's like one of the earliest books. But the Pilgrim's Progress is a very good book. It is a classic, right? It tells the story of the pilgrim and the many trials that he goes through on his way. So, and Gulliver Travels, yes, Gulliver's Travel is one. So we're thinking now, when it comes to plays, I would say The Merchant of Venice. There are a lot of plays like Sophocles, Oedipus, but Antigone is a good one. Tennessee Williams, A Streetcar Named Desire. If you remember, they did that play in Liberia a long time before. The Sound of Music, right? It's a play, and I would say it's a classic. My Fair Lady, yeah. So now we come to the criteria, right? My Fair Lady. Why is it a classical play? Why is Waiting for Godot? Now, Waiting for Godot by Beckett, if you remember when we did theater at the University of Liberia, Waiting for Godot appeals to a lot of people, because Waiting for Godot is like this theme of always waiting for something, right? These two men, they're waiting. And who are they waiting for? Godot. They don't know him. He never comes, but they're just waiting, and they're just waiting. And so the theme is something that is unattainable, something that you're hoping to get. It may or it may not come, like Godot, but they still wait. So that's a very interesting one. One book that I would say has influenced people not only in Africa but around the world is Steve Biko's "I Write What I Like." You know, his book is almost is a defiant anthem to apartheid. A lot of people have quoted the book. A lot of people have chosen to write like Steve Biko in the same vein. That's a book, Che Guevara's book, right? It's almost like that. You know, all his little writing, his journals and things like that. So we come down to how do you know it is good? What is the criteria? We say a universal theme. So you can be living in Cape Palmas and you write about love, right? So you say, oh, but love is a universal theme, but this book is not a classic. Stylistic methods, right? How you present this feeling of love, the setting, the characters, and has it endured over time. So people say that you don't, even if people write books, even if you look at Chimamanda's book, if you look like at Abdul Razak's book, right? He just won the Nobel Peace Prize, I mean Nobel Prize for Literature. But those are not classics because it takes years, right, to make a good classic. So we're saying that okay, will it oh sorry, is that prof? Will it endure over time? Will other people read this book and be inspired to write other books along the same vein? So a book um like Jean Eyre, right, is written in the first person narrative. That was almost the first time people started writing books like that. So that's a classic because not about the theme, but the stylistic method that she employed in writing the book. So Prof, how do you know your how do you know it is good, Prof? How do you know your okay, I'll put it back. Prof, can you hear me? But we're here again. Okay. Okay. So and then another one is that the work, it must influence other works, right? Like we say, it must influence other work that will come after it. A classic also breaks boundaries. So a book like To Kill a Mockingbird, people were hesitant to talk about race, about segregation, about equity, social justice, right? To Kill a Mockingbird came and shattered that barrier and said we're going to talk about it. So that's a book. Um, Another book is The Great Gatsby, right? The Great Gatsby talks about the social stratification of people. That's a classic, right? Oh yeah, you can hear him. I'm sorry. I think Prof is having a lot of a lot of problems with his computer today. Yeah. So what makes, I'm going to have my co-host, the audience, they are my co-host now. What makes things fall apart? A classic, in your opinion, given what you've heard about the complexity of the character, you've heard about the stylistic methods they've used, and and about the timelessness of the themes, the universal environment that is set. Why do you think Murder in the Cassava Patch, or why do you think things fall apart? Do you believe that it is a classic, or do you say that no, it's not? I would like someone to kind of like be my co-host and tell me why you think that um, it's not a classic, or it is a classic. If you've read Things Fall Apart, do you believe that it is a classic? And if so, why? If not, why not? If you've read uh, The Rain and the Night, Sankawolo's book, do you think that is a classic for Liberia or for West Africa? Do you think that Guyana Powell, do you think Love in Ebony is a classic? Why or why not? So do you think that a book like Beloved, The Bluest Eye, do you think those are classics? Do you think that The Color Purple is a classic? We're doing books by African Americans, Africans. Do you think that Um, do you think that a book like The Joys of Motherhood by Buchi Emechera, do you think that is a classic? Do you think Jakwa Nana is a classic? Um, I'm trying to get some comments. So, oh, Prof, I'm trying to get some comments here. So, Prof, are you here? I don't know if he has called if he's called William King. Okay, so come on, people. I'll post my comment. How about Les Miserables? You all saw the play. Do you think that's a classic? You know, and you know, Les Miserables is like, it's almost like Shelley, right? It's almost like the Frankenstein, like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, because it's about nurture and nature. Does the environment make the person, right? And they always say, "Oh, Les Miserables is about redemption." I don't really think so. I don't think Jean Valjean did anything wrong to be redeemed. He was only prosecuted for stealing bread. If you remember his play. So let's list. Okay, Mombedo and Hamilton can't be the only two. Let's hear some of the comments about the classics. How do you know it is good? What is your classic, and how do you know it's good? And what criteria did you use to judge it? While we wait for Prof, we said that our conversation is always a conversation, you know, and a journey. It's never an interview. It's never a, you know, it can be a debate, but it's never acrimonious. It's always civil, so we can talk about our different books, you know, and see. I reread Arrow of God the other day, and it was fun. I still think Things Fall Apart is one of the best books that Achebe has written. Cameron Lai, The African Child, they said is an autobiographical account of his life in Francophone Africa. But one of the books that I think people should read is The Education of a British Protected Child. And it is by Chinua Achebe. It's a collection of essays of his life. And it's very interesting, you know, that he talked about when he went to I think Kenya, and he wanted to drink, but blacks were not allowed to have alcohol, only the whites. And so he tried to buy alcohol, and he wasn't treated nice, you know, but things like that. The British Protected Child is actually a very good book that's overlooked, but it is a book that people should read. I don't know how many people read Maya Mains. How do you know it is good? When they were at the University of Liberia. I know. Yeah, I know a lot of people read it. People will fight belief, culture, values, and that what sets Things Fall Apart into a different category. Okay. So do you believe that Things Fall Apart is a classic, or do you think that it's in a different category by itself? Because so we're saying that stylistically, this was a book that the world, they were not used to having parables. They were not used to having proverbs. They were not, yes, and they were not used to having proverbs. They were not used to describing their rituals. They were not used to explaining their rituals and their rites. And Chinua Achebe just drew the curtain, and he said, this is what colonization took away. So I agree with you, Mombedo. It is a classic. And it also set the stage, because if you remember, right after Chinua Achebe, people started writing. Everybody wanted to put quotations in the thing. Everybody wanted to talk about their culture. Not that there wasn't culture before, because if you remember, I would say that yes, it's a theme any generation in all dispensation can relate to. It's also about what happens when there's a culture clash. You know, Cameron Lai book was good, But if you remember, there was no aspect of cultural life that Achebe did not touch. He touched about the peace festival. He talked about the naming of the children. He talked about even when he killed uh, I've forgotten his foster son name when he killed him. You know, Iswelu is the priest who condemned him. There were so many different layers in that book. You know, it's I would not even say it's an African classic. I would say that book is a universal classic. You know, it changed the stylistic method of the book. I would say Guyana Powell and Love in Ebony, they are Liberian classics because those books, written by men, right, spoke about the strength of women, which a lot of people did not do at the time. So those are pure classics, along with Murder in the Kisawa Patch. I think Murder in the Kisawa Patch is classic, but one of the primary reasons is that in the setting, if you remember when Baltimore was writing about that, that was the time when they were doing the upliftment of values and they were trying to bring the indigenous people into the reunification or of the body politic, as they call it. So here was Baltimore using simple English, extolling everything rural and traditional, and then showing what happens when these two cultures, not two cultures, but when the urban rural, when they come together, showing the greed, showing love, showing death, showing if you don't navigate these two cultures, I mean these two groups, this is what's going to happen, and this is what happened. So Baltimore, unlike Diana Powell and Love in Ebony, that was very dense. They had a lot of description. Murder in Sour Patch is a small book. It's a novelette. It's not even a novel. But there are so many things packed into this book that we say that it is a Liberian classic. You know, and I hope that those who are doing the 175th anniversary would have some place for literary works to showcase Bitey Moore, Beverly Kali, and Charles Cooper books, as well as the current ones that are there are so many of them now. So a book like Why Nobody Knows When He Would Die, right? That's a good read, but that's not a classic like Bitey Moore. Okay, one more time, we're going to try. Prof, you here?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Prof. Okay. Okay. So
All right, Brother King has done it. Well, the volume is already up. Uh-huh.
okay, Prof. If
Okay.
you turn your phone off, will we be able to hear you still?
Let's see. Hello?
We can hear you, Prof.
Okay.
So I've held the fort. Okay,
Yeah, what
no, okay, I've been having a good conversation with Mombedo and Hamilton Zilli, right? We've been
okay.
talking about the different ways that you can find you can judge a work as being classic. And I know, Prof, that you have this wealth of knowledge that you're going to share. But here is Mombedo. Mombedo and I, we are debating.
Uh,
That I say that Bitey Moore's Murder in the Kisawa Patch is a classic. But I say The
hmm.
Rain and the Night is not a classic. Mombedo say it's a classic. What say you, Prof?
How so? What I'm saying is, you first you want to talk about it may sometimes classics can be regional, they can be local as national. So you
Okay.
have to keep that
Yeah.
in mind. Yes. So you have to
Okay.
keep that in mind when yes when you are talking about this whole thing of class. And you know as well as I that when we're talking about this thing about taste, uh, except that you have to have a few constants. And I guess
Yes.
that's one of those we
Yes.
were talking about in terms of the the endurability of a piece of work in terms of it gets to a point where it is timeless. So this whole idea of classics, one has to be, in fact, you saw that in the context of Maya means how do you know it's good?
Yes.
So we have
Yes.
to be able to put a few things in context and then arrive at a point. So in the case of Baltimore, of course, we know that several generations have talked about that little book called uh, uh, Murder in the Cassava Patch, and you cannot say that of the Money Doubler. You cannot say that
That's
of the
what I
Money
said. The
Doubler.
Money Doubler is not a classic, but neither is the Rain in the Night. I mean, you say
Uh-huh.
taste. Mombedo say it is.
Yeah.
I say it's not.
So what reasoning did she give? Sometimes you want to give the reader a chance to be able to demonstrate a response towards whatever work we are talking about. So she said that what did she give as her reasons for saying that the Rain and the Night is a classic?
So
What
I'm
did she
sure
say?
she's going to defend herself. I am saying, Prof, that
Uh-huh.
if you look at War and Peace, right? Or you look at
Mhm.
the Tale of Two Cities. You look at Les Miserables, right?
Mhm.
Those are events
Yeah.
that happen in world history, right?
Yeah.
A
Mhm.
significant event in world history, right?
Okay.
The Gola War in Green and the Night
Mhm.
is an event. It's not a global history or world history, but are you saying that it's a national classic?
Yes, that's these are the things we have to go for. When you talk about the universality of a particular piece of work, just like you're talking about War and Peace or whatever, you talk about a significant uh, world event into which this guy tries as much as possible to weave a particular story. Yes, we can say it is an international classic, and yet you can also have local classics. What you have to keep in mind. You see, because then
Okay.
it is very much important. Yes, go ahead.
No,
Go
Prof.
ahead.
What I'm saying is that if when Maya May say, "How do you know it is good?" Right?
Mhm.
And she
Yeah.
says that you can read something and enjoy it, but that doesn't mean that it's a classic. It just means a good piece of writing, right?
Okay. Yes.
A classic break barriers. A classic
Mhm.
brings new
Yeah.
ideas. A classic stimulates you. A classic
And
also,
it's multi-generational.
yeah, that's what
The
Mombego said. She
attitude.
said it's a team any generation can relate to. But what I'm saying is that you can read Why Nobody Knows When He Will Die, right? You can read
Uh-huh.
The Senator's Suit. You can
Uh-huh.
read Jakwanana. They are good
Mhm.
readings, but they
Yeah.
are not classics. So Mobedo is saying that The Read and the Night is a classic, and I am saying no.
Well,
Because
you have to have a qualified no.
that's why let me
That's what,
defend myself.
okay. Please go ahead.
Le
Okay.
Gola War, Le Gola War was just a little. Oh, excuse me, for anybody who's Gola here, I'm not saying little, right? It happened. It was not a significant event that shook the world like World War II or World War One, right? Second of all, what are the universal themes within there that you would say, oh, this thing within here made it not even a world classic. I'm talking about a Liberian classic, like 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 Guyana Power, but it being the first novel, it broke barriers. So
Well,
what?
keep in mind, yeah, yeah, keep in mind too that towards the end of that novel, towards the end of The Rain at the Night,
Mhm.
especially the last chapter, the Pele and the Gola meet.
Yeah,
Here, a new chief is enthroned because the first chief had died in the war, the intertribal
yes,
war.
Yes.
He comes and he makes peace. And the Pele chief says, in fact, all the fighting that we've done, you have won the war. Why? Because you, instead of us initiating a peace of some of that nature, you initiated a peace. And by virtue of the fact that you initiated a peace, you have, in a sense, won the war. Which means then that if someone wants to see it as a classic, one has to go to how does peace come about? Someone has to a kind of humble himself or humble herself to be able to make a kind of supplication or something, even if it is not supplication. So within that context of making peace without raising any arm and what have you, at least there is an essence of classic in that place there. In other words, some of these things are not cut and dry. They are not cut and dry.
Prof,
Yeah. Go ahead.
if they had it like a love story within the Rain in the Night, some universal theme, how did that coming together of the Gola and the Pele, how did it influence any other writing? What kind of barriers did it break? Murder in the Kisawa Patch broke barriers
By what?
by the simplicity of the language, by the extolling of everything traditional, by showing. But actually, it's very interesting, Prof, that the three significant novels from Liberia were all written by men, and they were all about strong women who decided to live their own lives. Yeah, Tenenda, but Tenen, right? Tenenda.
Yes, yes, yes,
Oh, I'm sorry for you who haven't read Murder in the Kisawa Patch, Tenenda. But Prof, in that book, no, Prof, what I'm trying to defend myself. I'm trying to say, in Murder in the Kisawa Patch, it tells you what happened when love is not balanced, when one person loves more than the other, right? It tells you what happened when a family influences one person, right? It tells you what happens when the urban rural clash, or when they clash, but in I'm saying that in Rain and the Night, yeah, there was war, yeah, the people came together, but there are different ways of making peace. That's no universal theme. There are different ways. They just came together, and I'm saying that that was not a significant event. And another thing, Prof, you must also see, when Murder in the Kisawa Patch came, the barrier it broke was the innovativeness of writing simple English. And that's when Wilton Sangawolo is almost like I'm not saying he copied the themes or anything, but he copied the stylistic method of simplicity.
In which one now? In which one? You said Wilton Sangawolo copied the simplicity in which one?
I said when Bitey Moore started to write.
Okay, all right. Maybe
because what they are saying is that we're talking about Jean R, right, by Charlotte Bronte. And we said in Jean R, she uses the first person narrative, right?
Yeah.
In To Kill a Mockingbird, he uses a child's point of view, right?
Yeah.
So this was like the first time writers were using these stylistic methods, and then after that, other writers started to use them also. So these were groundbreaking novels. So Murder in the Kisawa Patch was a groundbreaking novel that set the stage to say it is okay to write about Liberia in simple English, to tell our story in simple English. Because look, Prof, what happened before? Edwin Barclay and all those people, the kind of big English they used to be using of starry host and wherefore at that, they had so much big language.
Of course, you know, we would say that such, like Frank Turbo would say, such was the time and such was the condition.
Yes.
You know very well that Samuel Taylor Coleridge and Wordsworth, they were the ones who decided to break away from the kind of highfalutin or that elite type of themes and language. So in the case of we can understand what happened in the case of Bai T. Moore, because Bai T. Moore and one or two others were able to talk about, hey, it is time for us to talk about the simple human being, the simple language, and what have you. So in that context, yes, we will say that Baltimore did break some ground, and that's what other people follow. But again, as I was saying, it is important for us to be able to dichotomize, to delineate some of these things about classes and what have you. Yes, if there is a piece of work that deals with international events, things that shook the world and what have you, that too becomes a classic within that context. But you have to understand that in the case of Wilton Sankaru, before he wrote a story about intertribal wars, we don't have anyone in the line of the list of people, the list of Liberian writers up to the time of Sankaru, who really got a story out of talking about intertribal war in a way that we will easily identify with. And perhaps within that context, we think that there is an element of classic in there. And that's what I said, that, hey, some of these things, they are not really cut and dry. Some of these things are not cut and dry to say, you cannot mechanically divide them. But if you seek to do that, and then of course there might be others that people might not take interest in, and you will take interest in what have you. It's sometimes difficult to come to that conclusion, but there is an element you have to look at in that process.
Okay, so Maya Mays, right? She says, I want to read one paragraph. She says, when you begin to she said, when you begin to detect the difference between freedom and sloppiness, between serious experimentation and ecotherapy, between skill.
She's talking about the craft.
Yeah, between skill and slickness, between strength and violence, you are on your way to separating the sheep from the goats. A form of segregation denied us for quite a while. All you need to restore is a small bundle of standards, right? And a Geiger counter that detects fraud. So that's what we are doing. So what I'm saying is that when people are writing, right, like she says, it could be ecotherapy, it could be some form of slickness, So what she's telling us is that when you're reading, be very careful, right? Read between the lines. When this artist is drawing, what is his purpose? Is there unity of focus in his thing, right? So that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that some of these are just good read, but they are not classics. Just how when you look at a piece of painting in the museum and people say, "Oh, this painting it was drawn by this person and it's a classic, it's worth $1 million," and you're still looking at it, because some critic is telling you that it's worth $1 million. But Prof, so what my question is, if it doesn't appeal to me, is it still art?
Well, you have to keep in mind that she says, hey, one time of looking at that thing doesn't give you confidence, doesn't give you a wherewithal in terms of saying, yes, I understand this thing. She said that you have to go there a couple of times. Remember, she talks about the association process. She talks about the association process.
Yes.
All right. So if you've never tasted palm butter before, and you taste palm butter for the first time, you do not have anything to measure to kind of compare that to. But if you have done that a couple of times and you come back to it, then you know what is good palm butter, and you know what is. Or let's talk about pasajama. If you tasted pasajama for the first time and you've never tasted it again, actually you will not be able to. So the key thing is visiting and revisitation. It is very much important to understanding the quality of that work you are looking at and where you will go with it. So that process of association is very much important. What's that?
Okay, so Hamilton Zilli is saying that Pilgrims Progress by John Bunyan is a classic novel because it's been around for a very long time, right? It's the second best-selling book of all time after the Holy Bible. But longevity is a
It may be
criteria of
part
a
of it, but
classic,
not the only thing.
huh?
Longevity is part of it, but it's not the only thing. That's what I'm
That's
saying.
what I was saying.
There are a couple of things that have to go together. And that is why sometimes it is hard to say, well, okay, you talk about longevity, you talk about crossing boundaries, talking about crossing boundaries, you talk about appealing to generations,
Yes.
either young or old. People find those books very much important. So the whole idea of longevity may not be the only thing that singles out a piece of work as a classic.
But Prof, also I'm saying, I mean, I agree with Hamilton Zilli because of even the storyline, of the pilgrim Christianity, the progress that they are making through life. But the thing is that a best-selling book does not have to be a classic. There are many books on New York Times bestseller list, books that have broken records, but they are not classics. Barack Obama book is not a classic. It's a good read. It's been on the New York Times bestseller, but it's not a classic, Or at least I don't think
Well,
so.
when I think about it, well, what you're saying, even if a book came out today and people are making raving about it or what have you, that moment of raving about that book doesn't make it a classic. But again,
Yes.
there are other components that you have to look at. One is how long it's been around. Two is to what extent it has cross
Boundaries.
ages and what have you, generations and what have you. There's another thing which has to do with the core part of the theme of that work. So it is not just one thing by which we say that this is a classic. There has to be a couple of determinants coming together to be able to set that stage. But in the case of Maya Men talking about how do you know it's good, one has to keep in mind that she that is why if she sends you to the museum, she tells you you're taking this one trip and think you understand what is in there, doesn't give you the uh, the kind of confidence to be able to say that yes, I know, I understand it, therefore this is a classic. You cannot say that. Visiting and revisiting. If you have a book, reading and rereading becomes that key thing that will make you understand certain nuances that you may not have discovered in reading that book on the first or second time.
Kayla said, what do you consider classic? And that's what we've been discussing.
It's not just one thing. It's not just one thing.
Yeah, we've been using Maya's article. How do you know it is good? To take us back down memory lane. To say that when we were at the university, that's what we used to do. Prof, I'm sorry, I don't know if you were listening, but when we read that article, we started to make fun of the article. We buy food to eat, and somebody would say, "Well, how do you know it is good?" And we would say, "It got meat inside."
The seasoning is well balanced.
Yes, but you see, that's what you're saying.
No plenty of salt, no plenty of pepper.
But that's what you're saying, Prof. You're saying that over time you build this criteria, this sense of this skill of taste, this skill of saying, I know it is good because over time I have seen what it means to be good food. So we say a book is a classic when it has endured the test of time, when it appeals, as Mombedo says, to it's intergenerational, it appeals to generations down. It has universal themes. It has broken barriers, whether stylistically, whether thematically. It maybe was a groundbreaking book. No other book did that. It set the trend, so people started to copy it in certain ways. So all of those things make classics.
All of it coming together.
Yeah.
It's a set of criteria. It's not like our brother asked about the meaning of classic. Classic, to define classic, is not just one thing. That's if people are going to get something out of our conversation, to define a classic is not on one principle or one criterion. It's got to be multiple, like 3 or 4 or 5 things coming together. Sometimes, of course, if you have 5 on the list of criteria and you get 3 out of them, that's a good one. You get 4 out of them, that's a good one. But one is may not be the only thing you look at and say this is a classic. That's probably one of the things we need to get out of our discussion or our conversation here.
And over time, you do build this repertoire of skills or discernment. Because, for example, Prof, when you're doing research and you get to the internet, you're not going to go to National Enquirer for your source. Mm-hmm. You're going to go to CNN. You're going to go to maybe Wikipedia. I don't know, but you're going to go to JSTOR.
No.
Yes. So those are you have acquired the skill to say, I know that these websites are good and these other ones are not good, because over time you have acquired this skill, and that's what we're saying.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How do you know you're good? I mean, how do you know it is good? And we used to always say, how do you know it's good? How do you know it's good? How do you become good? By mixing with the good. By mixing with the good. So Pref, leaving literary now, because you weren't here at the beginning when I said to them that this topic came out of one that we discussed last week, when I said that Mary Antoinette Brown Sherman was the best University of Liberia president ever. I put the emphasis on ever. And you said to me, why do you say that? And I gave you my reasons. And then when we even got off the air, you and I were still discussing you asked me, what do you mean by best? Yes, she was a good president, but what do you mean by best? And I tried to give you the reasons, right?
Yeah.
Now I will turn the tables on you, because I said to you that the university ran well. She was a woman of integrity.
What do you mean by ran well?
There were no boycotting, no food, no this, no that. Everything went smoothly. She held the professors at a very high criteria by saying you cannot work outside the university and you must publish. I think that she was a very good stabilizing force at the university.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, so based on that, that's my best. Now I turn it to you and say to you, since you say good and not best, who in your opinion was good at the university? Which president?
I won't get to that point because I don't want to be disingenuous in terms of ranking them. This is what
you don't have the skills to know who's good.
No, I'm coming. Let me land. I said, in the case of using the word best, I think it's very much important, because actually there has to be a real sort of evidence to me saying Mary Antoinette Brown was the best, or Bernard Blamu was the best, or something of that sort. You have to, especially in the case of institutions of higher learning, there has to be a set of criteria, and until we can discuss the criteria, I will not. You can say the best, of course. You are your own human being. I cannot. I will say that Mary Antoinette Brown was a very good person. But I will not, the word best and better, those are very important adjectives that we must not use loosely. So, for instance, if you are talking about the president of a college, you want to first talk about the lay down criteria for people becoming who they become as far as being heads are concerned. You have to talk about the curriculum and standard of the school within the context of the charter of that university. You have to think about the welfare of faculty and productivity. The faculty might be qualified, but if they don't have the tools and materials of production, definitely they will not be as productive as you want them to be. You also have to think about, we talk about the curriculum and standards, we talk about the faculty wellness and all those things. There were times in that place there because I taught at the university when Dr. Sherman was there. I won't lay that at her feet, but there were times that we had to wait for our salaries and all that kind of a thing.
Not long.
It
You
was
didn't have to wait
not
long.
funny. But no. But I live it now. Oh, Jackie, what are you doing? So I live it, and you are saying that I didn't live what I'm talking about. There were, and as I'm saying, it may not have been her doing, or maybe because of the stance she took in the place there wasn't that commodious relationship between her and government in certain instances. So all these things put together, you can say that she was good. Try as much as possible. She kind of navigated her way through those things, but there were certain pullbacks, especially even when it came to the demonstration. The demonstration at the school there when Dr. Sawyer and Dr. Senior and a few others got imprisoned and all that. So you have to look at multiplicity of factors. That's why to be cautious in dealing with arriving at a conclusion that this person is best and all that kind of thing, you have to think about those. I will continue to say, as I told you the last time, I said Dr. Sherman was one of the good one of the good leaders at the time, but I will not use the word best. But again, we are having discussion and what have you. The adjective that you prefer, that's what you use. Well, I cannot fault you for that. That's what it is. But in the long line of presidents over there, you will be hard pressed. Even that's why I say probably we need to do a research work on that to be able to be very strong in the conclusion we arrive at to say this person was the best and this person was not. Once we have the criteria and work through them, then of course we can come to what we have to do.
Okay, actually listening to you, Prof, it made me think more and more about Maya Main's article, because she's saying that it's true that we may have diversity of taste, right?
Mhm.
Like I would say, she's the best, and you say no, Jackie,
Yeah.
she was good, but she wasn't the best.
Yeah.
So what Maya Mains is saying is that we are differing on what makes best. And Maya Mains is saying that when it comes to works, literary works, art, and things, there should not be a differing. There should be what we call a common standard, right?
Mm.
By which we judge something, right, Prof? I'm not misreading her, right?
Which brings in the whole thing as to determine the criteria. Once the criteria is discussed and what have you, once the criteria is discussed and there is a kind of some sort of agreement on that criteria, then of course we can come into the commune of intentionality, the commune of what? Of conclusions.
So my question to you, Prof, is that if we say that we want to nurture and
Yeah.
inspire a new generation of writers, of painters,
Yeah.
of artists, right? If we
Mhm.
say that our young people should not be restrained in the way they think, right?
Which is one of the things. What do we mean by restrain?
No, I said restrained, restrained.
Okay, restrain. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if that is the case, right,
Mhm.
are we
Mhm.
not restraining them in saying to them, look, these are the criteria by which you're going to judge this literary work. And this is the only criteria these are the only criteria you should be judging them by, not your own personal taste, but these criteria.
Well, the thing about it is that is why you cannot speak in absolutes when you come to those things. Uh, the thing about it is that you in judging, we have to keep in mind the discussion of tiers, levels. So we can talk about the first tier, we can talk about the second tier, and that sort of a thing. Probably we can have 5 tiers, or we have 3 tiers. So within that context, you have a wiggling room where someone can move from this part to the other part and what have you. But it's not a matter of restriction. In the case of talking about academic institutions, you know very well that people will talk about credentials. You know very well that people will talk about the curriculum and standards. You know very well people will talk about the welfare of the faculty, including salary, all those things. You talk about even the staff that are supposed to look at the plants and the grounds of the university. In other words, the environment of the university. How well are those people cared for to be able to interact very well with the guests and parents coming to the campus? So all those things, yes, what you consider X may not be X, what you consider Y may not be Y, but the idea is that we have, for instance, within the context of writing, you say that the people should have skills, writing skills. What is wrong with that? That they should know the craft. Of course, if they don't know the craft, whatever comes out will be nonsense. So there are things that we can kind of set up, and there might be wiggling room here and there, but those things will always be there. So it's not a matter of saying, according to the gospel, this is what it's supposed to be.
There will wiggle room.
Yes,
You're saying
that's
it should not be too wide. It should be
not be
too wide.
Yeah, it's not. It should not be too wide.
Yes. So, for example, let's come to credentials, right? Like you're saying,
Yeah.
let's say somebody says, "Oh, I have a PhD," right? From Y university, and somebody say, "Oh, but I have a PhD from A university." So A is the top university, Y is the one below, and somebody comes and says, "Yeah." So you're saying that
they have the universities that they graduated from our credential. I mean, our accredited. So it's not the matter of someone came from Harvard and someone came from North Central, and therefore the very fact that this person has a PhD and what is that person doing with his or her PhD becomes the thing to look at. So does the set of criteria call for a PhD? Yes, that person has a PhD. That should be what? That is what to be looked at. Does that person have a master's? Yes, that's what should be supposed to be looked at. And then of course you see what that person is doing with the degree or degrees that he or she gathered.
So you're telling me that when we're doing criteria, right? Credentials, how do you know it is good? You're saying that in academia, all of the criteria that's laid out to say these are this constitutes good university. You're saying that those should go out the window and you just should look at the degree?
What are you talking about? You're confusing yourself. Don't confuse yourself and think you're confusing me. I told you that if it is said that this position calls for a PhD,
yes,
this thing calls for a PhD, which is normally a research terminal. Does that person have it?
Yes,
that's the question. Does that person have it? Okay. So I'm not throwing out credentials. Of course, I cannot, especially when you're talking about learning institutions. You have to be qualified to be able to be at a particular level in teaching at a university. So that has to be a part of it, which is the credential, which is something that has to do with the earned degree. So then we move on to the other thing. We move to the curriculum and standards. What are the programs in there, and how are they taught in the place there? And how do we know that they are being taught very well? The alums of the university should be able to be the ones. The productivity of those people, that is all the reason why if you have a university, you must make sure that you keep an eye on the graduates of that place there. It is sometimes, I see it being nonsensical where people graduate from a university and nobody ever establishes contact on them. You've got to be able to establish a contact with them so that every time, even newsletters and all those things should be able to kind of talk about the work the alums are doing out there in the area of agriculture, in the area of sociology, in the area of law, in the area of medicine. All those things, the university must be able to have a record, a compendium of the alums of that university. So we know that the curriculum and the standards are kind of manifesting themselves in whatever is done outside there. So when it
And
comes to the faculty as well, yeah, go ahead.
no, I
When
was
it comes
saying,
to the
and
faculty,
does the
yeah,
university
go ahead.
have a compendium, as you put it?
Uh-huh. You are asking, no, I don't know about that, Jackie. Again, this is where the university community relationship have to do a lot of work to make sure that there is always that contact between people as they leave and as they come into the picture.
So okay, so Prof, we come back to literature. What
Yeah,
what
please.
what what two books you consider classics and why?
I will, for instance, I will look at uh, the one by Chinua Achebe, uh, Things Fall Apart. Things
You
Fall
can name
Apart.
any book that we have discussed.
You can't name any book. I want to make sure that people that are interacting with us as part of the audience are following. When Achebe brought out the book, Nigerians will say Achebe. When Achebe brought out that book, John Conrad, uh,
Heart of Darkness.
the yes, the things he said about about Africa, the nonsensical things he said about Africa, someone at that time had to kind of have a pushback, and after that pushback, so how many people who went to school in the late 60s, the 70s, the 80s, I'm not talking, how many people you have asked and will not tell you, I read Things Fall Apart? Those people will say that. Another book by, what is it? Cyprian Equensi. We play down that book.
Cyprian
But if you
Kwesi.
look at Cyprian Equensi, you look at Jaguar Nana. Jaguar Nana, the, the, the story of Jaguar Nana may seem simplistic, but there is this little girl or this woman who comes from rural Nigeria and almost without even thinking gets so easily baptized into urban life, and the kind of frustration and things that she goes through. You can look at virtually a lot of the novels that are come out of Africa today, and you will see an element of the clash between rural life and urban life and what it does to individuals in that process. You can find that in that book. So you can these things is one of just paying attention, and you are going to get a lot of the things that are supposed to be elevated in terms of understanding one, the life of Africa, both in the rural setting and the urban setting, and you will find that lessons are in there that you will work with.
So even the theme of urban rural clash in in
Yes.
in um in Baltimore's Murder in the Sour Patch is also in
Okay.
Jakwanana, you know, and in fact, if you look at Murder in the Cassava Patch, there is lot underneath that is left unsaid about
Hmm.
Tene and the queen life, you know. But
Yeah,
Jakwanana
and
lived in the urban area, you know, and
yes,
so you're able to see that. Okay, so you're saying that Jakwanana is a classic because of the universal theme of rural and
of
urban,
urban rural clash. Yeah, rural clash, urban and rural clash. That is an
and
important thing
love.
actually.
That's love.
Well, okay, all right. If you put love there, fine. But I'm talking about it is like there are certain sub themes and what have you. But in the case of rural and urban clash, that has become what? That has become a towering thing in the case of dealing with developing countries and what have you. To this
So
day,
you're saying that Jakwanana is a classic, is an African classic,
yes, it
or
is.
a third
It
world,
is because of,
or
huh?
global south classic.
Yeah, well, look, these Jackie, with all due respect to you, all these words they threw around, global south and global north and all that kind of thing. I'm not hard for them. But the thing about it is
Global
that when
south.
you talk about okay, global south, okay, Nina, we talk about global south. But the thing about it is, see what the clash in urban rural life has done in developing countries and what have you. What the thing, especially after the war, of course, somebody would say, well, they came here, they came to the capital because the capital was more protected than the rural Liberia or rural Africa and whatever. But the thing about it, what is that? What a
No, no, we're
person have?
listening to you, Prof.
Okay, all right. So yeah, so the thing about once you talk about there will be love. Look, in rural life, I mean, rural life, urban life, there will be love, except that people know how to play their love. In rural life, people don't. Well, now it's changed. Now people can kiss in rural life, but years gone by, people didn't kiss. If you love somebody, you just threw. If a woman loves you, she just threw her hair tie around your neck, and then well, that's showing love. Or sometimes she threw her lapper at you. That was love. It wasn't kissing and what have you. So what I'm saying is that the key thing has to do with urban, rural, urban clash, or urban rural drift, that sort of a thing we can talk about. So that becomes a high point of a theme that metastasized in uh, uh, a lot of uh, uh, writers' work. The other book, which is Petals of Blood. I don't know whether you've come across
Hey,
Petals
Petals of Blood, yes.
Petals of
Yes,
Blood by Ugu Wathiago,
Ngugi.
one of his
Yes,
yeah,
Ngugi.
Wungigi. Yes. Now again, in India, Kenya has independence, and all the euphoria that came out eventually it was quenched by virtue of people having hope for liberation, and that's where another theme of hope and despair in what the
Yes,
context
yes.
of liberation and all that kind of thing will come into the picture. So all these things, it may not be what you call uh, universal or global type of thing, but you have to look at the classics that appeal to various uh, countries and all that.
So,
I can
so,
I can
so,
go ahead.
so when we start, the, the course I was telling you about, where I mean, I had no idea that the historians
Mhm.
there's a big debate about what constitutes global history and what
Uh-huh.
constitutes world history. And people
Uh-huh.
might think that, oh, world history and global history is the same. It's not the same. Global history is
Uh-huh.
more about the personal interaction, the connections that happen,
Mhm.
whereas world history is that overarching one. But Prof, it's interesting because people nowadays, when a book comes out, they will say a modern classic. Instead of saying, yeah,
You throwing around words, Jackie. That's my
yeah, they say
problem. Throwing
a
around
modern classic.
mhm.
And we'd be
You
like,
are being
what do you mean a modern classic? Because classic
yes,
should endure. This book is not a
yes,
classic, but
yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah,
This
yeah, yeah.
and you will always find me, even if somebody wants to make my head big and say that I'm one of the best writers in Liberia, I would say no. I'm a good writer, fine, but I'm not the best. I refuse to accept that. You see, one has to be. When I use the word, then you start laughing. There has to be intentionality of the words we use. You see, when you say that this thing is good, when you say that this thing is the best, in fact, that's the ultimate. That is the ultimate. So it's not the matter of you don't like that person or what have you. Mary Antoinette Brown Sherman, in the first place, from I that's a different story we can talk about. But my mother growing up and what have you has made me to respect a lot of women who have achieved. My mother, were Congo people and beating them and other kind of thing, and therefore she didn't get to where she was supposed to get. So when I see a woman just by rising, I almost want to roll before that woman. So these are things that we don't talk about, but they are there. And in the case of Mary Anthony Brown Sherman, that woman, even whenever Doe came and what have you, she stood, well, I don't know whether I should say stood like a man, but she stood up. And therefore, her lieutenant, Dr. Tapper and Dr. Senior, once she spoke, they rallied behind her. And so there are checkered things here and there that we can say she did well. And, and
She
of
was a
course, she
classic.
is
She
you.
was a
Well, go ahead. She was a classic. Well, and there are certain things, as I said, I did admire about her. And, you know,
Yeah. Now that we have kind of like touched on what makes a classic, whether it's a literary piece or art, when we start to again start to we've laid the groundwork because that's what we did in the class. We discussed what is global history and what is world history. So every time we're reading a book, we always ask,
yeah.
Is this global history or is this
And
world
again,
history? And based on the discussion, the students
mhm,
we begin. But so when we start back to our original purpose, which is literature, we will be asking you when we're discussing books, we'll be asking you, is this a classic? Is this a modern classic? Is this an African classic? Is this a Liberian classic? So that based on that, you're able, with this knowledge that we have discussed, our criteria, that it should break boundaries, it should set new standards, people should, it should change the discourse or change the narrative as it goes forward. You will know whether it's a classic or not.
original thing. In fact,
Yeah.
an original thing.
Yes. Say, how do you know it is good? And then you have your criteria to say, well, my taste, I like this book, but it is not a classic based
Yeah.
on this. Yeah. Yeah.
For
So
instance,
probably,
there are people who take pleasure in scatological literature. Huh? They take interest in scatological literature, erratic literature and what have you. For their taste, fine. But actually, uh, probably given the language and things like that, you will not call it whatever you want to call it.
yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Like I mean, when I was in high school, I read My Fair Lady, and I thought that was the best play ever. You know,
Yeah.
and then I read A Streetcar Named Desire, and I was like, and then and then Waiting for Godot, and then Death of a Salesman,
Ah,
you know.
yes, yes.
So all
Love
of
of a
those,
salesman.
come together, and you're able to discern. So I guess what
Yes.
she's saying is right, that you cannot take one book. You have to have a repertoire of reading
Yes.
material over
That's
time.
the key word. That you have to have a repertoire. Yes.
Yeah. So
It's
you can
coming
say,
to a
I
become
know
a
what a
connoisseur.
classic is.
Yes.
Prof, it's almost like, I mean, you can really relate things to the everyday. So for example, let's say you've been wearing rubber shoes all your life,
Yes.
and then one day God bless you and you have money and you put on leather shoes, you
Wow.
know, and then you know the difference, right? And then you say,
Yes.
okay, this is better, right?
Yes.
So your
Yes.
tastes have changed, your standards have risen,
Huh?
and
Yes.
nothing else
Yes.
will suffice. The rubber shoes will never suffice again, because
You got it for true. Uh-huh.
I mean, I try to put it in there every day, because you're in you've worn leather shoes now, then you're like, I know what good shoes, what a good pair of shoes
Yes.
is, and
Feel
I'm
like you did it.
never
Yes.
going to wear
Mhm.
rubber shoes again. So how do you know it is
Repertoire.
good? By
The
wearing,
real.
by tasting, you know. Yeah, I mean, like for me,
Yes.
my grandmother, my great grandmother was from Kipamos. Every day, man, why you cooking pan butter? Why you cooking pan butter? So
Uh-huh.
if somebody cooks pan butter, because I've tasted my great grandmother's real pan butter, I know if it's good or not.
Exactly. The
Yes,
word repertoire is a
repertoire.
key word.
Yeah, yeah.
Repertoire.
Your bundle of criteria that you carry
Yeah.
with.
Yes. The bundle that you carry. That's what it is.
Yeah, it's as simple as saying, why do you go to why do you go to McDonald's and not to Burger King? So many different ways you can use
Yes.
these same
Yes.
things. How do you know
Exactly.
it's good?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So
That's the
probably
key. The key phrase too that you have about is the association process, the process of association.
yeah,
If you see one thing, how many things do you know of from your experience that you can compare that thing to? How many things? That's where the repertoire comes in. That's where the association process comes in.
yeah.
Okay.
So
Mhm.
we've come to another. See, Prof, join us. So we've come to another end of our literary hour, and we've said to you that we like being here. Prof and I, we
Yeah.
discuss all the time. Sometimes after the show we talk. Sometimes on Tuesdays we talk. On Wednesdays we talk about what we're going to discuss. So um it's not without rhyme or reason. This show has a
Mhm.
rhyme and it shows has a reason. So even if we come and there's not a guest and there's not a book we are discussing, there's a rhyme and a reason. There's a how do you know it
We
is
have
good? There's a criteria, there's a repertoire to our
yeah, yeah, yeah,
to
yes,
our
that's true.
yeah. So we thank you for joining us. We
Mhm.
ask you to join us next week, and we've said this
And
again and again.
before you finish, Jackie, let us give a hand clap. In fact, cheers for William King. He did it. You know, William King. He brought
Yay,
us.
Williams!
Yes, yes. Where is
Yes,
he? Okay.
I,
Yeah,
I,
but he
I,
did
I
it.
think
Yeah.
it's all. But thank you, William. Thank you, and Prof. We're sorry that it didn't start at the beginning, but you're here. That all that matters. And I will let you say your closing remarks before we end.
Yes. I just want to appeal to people to never throw words like better and best around. uh, if before you do that, be able to list at least 4 or 5 things up on your fingers. You say, so when someone asks you, uh, Toba was the best. Why was he the best? Doe was the best. Why was Doe the best? That sort of thing.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so we keep that in mind. But it's always good to define words. It is always good to define words, especially those words that are pregnant with meaning. You've got to be able to define them to be able to use them very well. And if you didn't get any other thing out of our session today, this must be what you take. Define your words, define your words, define your words. Okay.
Yeah. And
And
thank
thank
you,
you,
Prof.
Jackie, for keeping the fort. You have the fort.
Yeah, I held down the fort. I was like, oh, where's Prof? Where's Prof? Yeah, but thank you all again for joining us.
Yes.
And yeah, sometimes we make fun, but um, when you say how do you know it is good, it permeates every aspect of your life. You
Yes.
know, how do you know this person is good? How do you know?
Yes.
Because I associate with goodness. I know that lying is bad. So my
Yes.
repertoire of judging people will be people who speak the truth, people who are
Yes.
honest, people, so that
Yes.
repertoire that you have is what Maya means is talking about. When she says that
Yes.
don't let people give you a wiggle room for goodness and bad
Yes.
and bad. She says that
Yes.
that wiggle room should not be too wide. You must have
Yes.
a standard. That's what she's saying. You
Yes.
must have a standard, and that standard must be tested over time. That's it. Tested. So when you say, "Oh, I like this person," why do you like
Mhm.
that person? You ask
Yes.
yourself. Don't just say, "Oh, I just like this person." No, 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 no. How
They
do
call
you
it
know?
stop.
Yes, that's the question. How do you know this person is good? Well, I know they're good because they are honest, they are forthright, they're straightforward, they are
Exactly.
dependable. Those are the things, we always try to make things complex. They're not. All Maya means is saying to you is that you must have a set of criteria as you go through life. And that set of criteria will keep you instead to say, oh, Jackie, you know what good palm butter is? This is not good palm butter based on your experience. This is not a good person based on your experience. And over time, as you build this repertoire, when you meet the person, you wouldn't even need to waste your time. Soon as the person starts talking, you say, based on my repertoire, I know this person is not good. And that's what she's saying. When you start to read this book, you will say, yeah, I'm enjoying the book, but based on what I know, this is not a classic. Things like that. That's what she's saying. So that's why we always say, this, how do you know it is good? It's also a part of your core. And we always say that, what is your core? So yeah, so this is also part. So I'm sorry to make it so philosophical, but I think that your core is really what's central to everybody. What is your truth and what is your core? And if it's unshakable, nothing's gonna shake you. If they say what, if the branches are, if the tree roots are strong, the branches will shake, but they will not fall off. So that's what Maya Mays is saying. How do you know it is good? It is good because these are the things that you have to judge this piece of book. These are the things you have to judge this work of art. Yeah, so we come to another, and don't forget, we will not be begging you. We will come and we will discuss, Prof and I. But we're saying to you,
beg you come. You make sure you come. Beg you.
They come, Prof. Even if they're 10, they come and we have fun. But I'm saying that if there's a book that you want us to discuss, if there's a book that you want us to read as a group and discuss, let us know. I mean, I know Friday is difficult because you guys want to go out. But if you're in, just tell us, oh, what about if we read Arrow of God? Why if we read Man of the People? Why if we read The Senator's Suit? And let's discuss it and see, And as you say, that's how we built our repertoire of reading materials yet. So we thank you. We thank you for coming. Mombedo, I still don't think it's a classic, but I agree with you that it's a good book. So we thank you for joining us. We know that we have a long weekend, so enjoy yourself. I got my bottle of wine, Prof. I have a paper due, but I'm going to drink some wine and I'm going to chill.
Oh my God. You.
Yeah, so thank you all for coming, for joining us today. I'm going to try and see if I can end the broadcast and put the song on. I'm new at this, but like I say, please tell your family and friends and loved ones to take the vaccine, mask up, be safe, pray for our country. Liberia, wash your hands, as Prof says, uplift Liberia, and we'll see you next week. And like I said, focus on Liberia at gmail.com. If you want to send us questions, if you want us to discuss a topic that hasn't been discussed, let us know, and we will try and fit it into our repertoire. Yeah. So thank you very much. Be safe, and remember, whether you think it's a classic, whether you think it's not a classic, whether you think that it's a modern classic, whether you think it's just a good book, we are all Liberians. All of us are Liberians, and let's hold together and build our country. So, Prof, I'm going to try and see if I can I can end the broadcast. Yes. So take care and be safe. And I hope I can end it. I think I can. Okay, Prof.
We are Liberians. Liberia is our